This is Gene Lundquist, and we're here today at Pozo Park, and we're going to interview Donnie Simons. And Donnie brings a wealth of historical knowledge about Pozo Park, and I think you'll find it interesting. Donnie, we're here in front of a sign. Tell us a little bit about that. Beloved citizens of Pozo Park.
Well, the original sign, all the rock work in front of the sign was made back in 1949 and 50, and in July 26th of 51 it was dedicated to my grandparents, Fred and Harriet Simons, who were the beloved citizens of Pozo Park. Sterling Giddings, Mr. Barr, Mr. Kolenchek, Mr. Bradford, Claude, which is my uncle, and
Limbeck.
Mr. Limbeck was there. It's Kenny Limbeck, and they all built this wall here. And then the campground, or actually, when I say the Pozo Park, dedicated the property to Grandma and Grandpa and everything, and they celebrated their 50th anniversary. They were originally from England. They came to the United States in 1912, which some of the old timers probably maybe have given them the information to their kids that used to come up here and everything.
Well, so the sign says honoring residents 1915.
Yeah. That's
so
when Grandma and Grandpa actually were some of the first citizens up here to build a cabin.
Right. So actually, this is the 100th anniversary of them arriving here.
100th anniversary.
And it's Memorial Day 2015, so maybe it's kind of appropriate that we're talking about them a little bit.
It is. You know, I've thought about that for the last 5 years, you know. Gosh, it'll be 100 years, you know. Of course, I was only born in 1939, the year my grandfather retired from Associated Oil. And grandmother was living down at that time in Bakersfield, but Grandpa did a lot of chasing for Associated Oil from he got his first job, I believe, was right around 1911 in Bakersfield. I don't know if he knew Kenny Lembeck at the time, but my grandmother's sister was in Los Angeles when they came across on the train and met them there, and that's how they came up over the old Ridge Route, as everybody calls it, you know, the original Ridge Route.
Right.
But there's 3 episodes of that thing, as a lot of everybody knows and stuff like that.
Well, I hear that Fred, at least, and maybe Harriet Simons, were scheduled to come over to America on the Titanic. Is that true?
Right, they were. My grandfather was a builder in England. They used to build homes and what we would call today construction businesses and stuff like that, and he had sold it, but the fellow that had bought it reneged on the deal, so they had to cancel their trip on the Titanic, and they had steerage, which means they were at the back, in the bottom, back into the boat and at the bottom. So, well, everybody knows what happened at that time and everything. But they came over on the Baltic, and that ship wound up in the Japanese scrapyard back in 1932.
Okay, well, that's fortunate for all of you relatives, or you wouldn't have been here maybe.
Right. Well, the rest of the family, my dad was a year and a half old when they came over. His brother Stuart was 7, and Margie was 5.
Okay.
And everything, Aunt Margie there.
Margie Hackett.
Margie Hackett and Stuart Simons.
Now listen, Donnie, it says honoring beloved citizens of Pozo Park. Why were they so beloved, and why was this thing erected solely for the Simons?
Well, they were the original, and everybody considered them the first citizens of Pozo Park. I think there was 2 other cabins up here, but they were strictly summer cabins. Grandmother and Granddad, they started living up here full-time in 1939, and they were actually full-time residents except when it snowed pretty deep. And a lot of folks know about when they had snows up here. There's been as much as 11 and 12 feet of snow up here in this park.
Yeah, well, not lately.
Yeah, no. Their original cabins, there was 3 original Simons cabins, and 2 of them were collapsed by the weight of the snow. There was so much up here. And we have pictures of my dad and his brother standing on top of the cabins.
Oh, wow.
When they were digging them out and everything.
Now, tell us about the cabin that's right down the road from here, maybe 3 or 4 houses down from where we're standing. Did Did Fred Simons, your grandfather, build that?
Grandfather built that one there.
It's a log cabin, isn't it?
It is a true log cabin, except all the logs are vertical and not horizontal. So when everybody says, nowadays I'm going to have a log cabin built, where you get them 12 and 14-inch logs. Well, this one here started out with 6, 8, and 10-inch logs and everything. The floor was originally logs, and then they had it overlaid with flat stuff. But that cabin was built in 1928, and that's when they came back from Brea, the city of Brea. Grandpa and the family were down there for 4 years. He worked for Associated in Brea, California. And then he come back up here, and they built their cabin, and he said, this is where we're going to retire, and that's what they did. They retired with a 1933 Chevrolet four-door sedan, and Granddad quit driving around 35, and Grandmother did all the driving after that.
Well, Donnie, I know you spent a lot of time up here. Are there any particularly memorable incidents or memories that you have of Pozo Park?
Oh, visiting everybody's house around here. Everybody, when all of us kids were up, and when I say kids, well, there was Gary Giddings, there was myself, and there was your family was up here, and I believe you were up here quite a bit. Chuck Hayes, his mom was up here.
Yeah, Ruth Hayes.
Ruth Hayes, right. Knew she lived down behind the Giddings down there, and we, all of us guys and gals, we used to chase up and down the creek. I'm trying to remember who the family was that lived just to the east of her house right there. We used to have taffy pulls there on Friday and Saturday night. Everybody would get there and have a good time.
What was it like coming up here when you were a young boy? What were the roads like, and what did you do?
Well, let's see, what did I do? My dad, well, we lived in Buena Park down in Orange County. And Dad would get a hold of Grandma and Grandpa, would write them letters, or he would get a hold of Kenny Lembeck in Bakersfield or Oildale and have him get messages to his Grandma and Grandpa that we were coming up. And we'd always stop at Wayne's Dairy there on North Chester at Kern River and pick up the milk and some of the other stuff. And then we'd stop at I'm trying to remember the name of the market there that was in Oildale. It was a family-owned fair. That's where we'd pick up all the food and bring it up and everything. The first time I can remember coming up, we came up during the Second World War in a 1940 Chevrolet sedan, and that was before my sisters were born. And we used to come off of the Grapevine down through Wheeler Ridge, and they had a fruit station there where they would stop you to check and see if you were bringing any illegal fruit into the county. And my dad told me years later, he said, I'd always throw an extra case of oranges in there for the guy, and he would pick them up and say, thank you very kindly, you didn't have anything, But I always remember, and probably a lot of folks nowadays, they don't take the old 99 road out, but I always remember the eucalyptus trees.
Oh, yeah.
I always remember the eucalyptus trees.
They're still there.
They're still there. I mean, they don't take care of them like they used to. They used to have them all trimmed up and stuff like that, and after a while they just let them go.
Yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah, but there was a lot of folks out there that grew a lot of food that would have roadside stands, and we'd stop there and pick up stuff, bring it up with us fresh. There was no refrigerators here in the park because there was no electricity till about 1954-55. And the first propane tanks that were brought into the park were around 1950. So Grandmother's refrigerator was a burlap box that sat out on the back porch, and the air and wind used to blow through it with the water soaking the bags there, and that's what kept everything cool. So about every 2 or 3 days she'd go down to Balance Rock and buy the stuff that she needed to keep on hand and everything. She cooked on a wood stove. I can always remember the wood stove. Some great food came out of that. And then
a little more work to put it together, though.
Well, she enjoyed it. She enjoyed it. I can remember getting up early in the morning and putting kindling in there and starting the fire and everything. When she got her first propane stove, she started cooking on it. She says she wanted Grandpa to get it out of there. She says, I can't cook on this thing. She used to get upset about it. And the actual first refrigerator they had was before they had electricity. They had the propane. It was an old Serville refrigerator. It had the cooling tower set up on top of it.
Yeah.
I can always remember that. Yeah.
Well, Donnie, you mentioned when electricity came in and everything. What do you think of Pozo Park today in 2015?
How do you want me to explain that one? That's a good one. You'll have to think back. There was probably a 20, maybe 25-year stretch in there that I only came up maybe once every 2 or 3 years, and it was hard to see the change, but I've always talked to a lot of folks and told them, I said, what is the one biggest change in this park through all these years, especially I'm 76 and I left here probably when I was 19 or 20,
Yep.
maybe even 21. And what is the one thing that changed the park more than anything else? And everybody tries to think. And I said, you ever notice one thing? You can't see the forest for the trees,
Yep.
And that's one thing, I can remember standing up on the corner in front of Giddings' house and looking down, and you could see Grandma and Grandpa's cabin to the west there. And there wasn't tree one out there.
Really?
There wasn't tree one. And the road, you could see the top of the road. And there's I've got some pictures of cabins here that were sitting out in the middle of nowhere. And then now when I walk the creek all the way from what I call the old Sears house, but it belongs to Gene and his wife, everything. And I walk all the way down to the cattle guard and everything. It's hard to follow now because there's no path. Nobody travels it anymore.
Yeah.
As kids, we used to travel that thing 8, 9, 10
By
times
the creek.
a day. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Now,
Run up and down that creek and used to fish in there and get some pretty good fish out of that creek, I'll tell you.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Then the best fishing was from the cattle guard all the way over to the gorge.
Yeah.
There was some great fishing in there, but we pulled some 12 and 13 inchers out of there. Yeah.
Donnie, I like to hike around these mountains here, and I see some old cedar trees that are still standing that have been scorched by fire. Was there any sort of fire activity up here, near here, when you were here as a young boy?
Well, I don't remember any fires being
Must have
up
been
here
before your time.
before my time, but I know some of the cabins have had fires in here, and of course, relating from getting the information from Claude and Margie, it's like, I believe it's the Brown's cabin next to Giddings there.
yeah.
That one burnt to the ground. And then the other cabin that was up by the pump house where the well is right now, that cabin burnt down. And then there was, I think, a smaller one right at the beginning of the park, but I don't remember when that one burnt down and everything.
Yeah, okay, well, I was just hoping I might find a little information out about, because there was a fire here at one time, and of course that's a big, big, big concern of all of us here at Pozo Park to make sure we don't get another one.
Yeah, the fires, if there was one up here. Now, I know at one time Claude and Margie used to live over on what they call the Bowen Ranch, or the Bowen property, where the old tungsten mine now. They had a fire over there.
Yeah.
That was a big one. That was back in 1946, 47, along in there.
Well, Donnie, we're going to end up this interview, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to just say whatever you want to say. Is there anything in particular you want to say about Pozo Park over the years, or the people here, or whatever?
I'll tell you what, I've met some of the greatest and some of the most fabulous people here in the park, and they haven't changed. You can walk up and start talking to them. They greet you like family, and that's the way it was when I was growing up here. All the doors were open. Of course, nowadays you have to respect their privacy and you have to knock on the door. It's like Kathy and Chuck. I went up this morning, the door was open. I said, Kathy, hey, are you here? And she says, yeah. And I said, it's Donnie Simons, and she just says, come on in, Well, that's what it was when us kids were running wild. We'd always come up to somebody's house, and we knew they were there. We'd always holler, hey, it's the Rowdy Bunch,
Yeah.
And they always had lunch for us and stuff like that. And then we'd be gone from in the morning until late afternoon, and nobody worried about us and everything. They just told us where to be and what time, and if we respected that, we had fun.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of good times.
It was a great time in your life.
And I miss a lot of the folks that I knew, a lot of the folks at that time. I've seen Donna Giddings and everything, and Gary, of course, Gary was a good friend. and Gary Hackett, my uncle's boy, he'd come up here in the summertime, and then both my cousins, Ronnie and Jerry, and we'd have a great time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of folks, but the group in the park now is great, and I'm
Yeah.
glad they're bringing their kids and their grandkids up here.
Oh, yeah.
To enjoy this and everything.
Well, listen, Donnie, thank you very much for this interview, and we wish you and Ruth the best, and be careful in your travels, and we'll see you again soon, I hope.
Okay, thank you very kindly, Gene. I
Okay.
appreciate it so very much.
Okay.